Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So we have to talk about New York State, which is a state that voted for Joe Biden in 2020 by 23 points and only voted for Kamala Harris by just 12. It is moving to the right, and you have a very unpopular Democrat governor. You have a lot of unpopular Democrat leadership in the state of New York, and they had a relatively close election in 2022 where Kathy Hochul barely beat Lee Zeldin by New York standards for governor, and her approval rating has fallen even further since. And we have this new poll from Siena, which now shows that she is less popular in New York State than Donald Trump. 44% approval rating for her, 46% for Donald Trump. And it's technically true, yeah, you could do the net approval, and it's roughly about the same. But here's the kicker. 31% of voters in New York say that they would vote to reelect Hochul. 57% want somebody else. That doesn't mean she's going to lose by 26 points, but it shows that she's extraordinarily unpopular. But she's not like unpopular to the point where she would lose a Democrat primary, but she's unpopular to the point where she would get by in a Democrat primary as the incumbent governor and very possibly lose to a Republican in the state of New York. Could you see the state of New York elect a Republican governor? The answer is absolutely. And New York, you're seeing what's going on there. You're seeing the leadership overall just extraordinarily weak, corrupt, and obviously they're on the left. And people, as time goes on, they're going to want to change. The border crisis has disproportionately affected New York. New York's leadership has done nothing but coddle these people that have poured in to the country illegally. You have some of these people in luxury hotels while you have homeless veterans on the street. It's a total disgrace, and more people by the day have woken up. It's why New York has moved vastly to the right. New York City. You're talking about Staten Island, which Donald Trump won by about 15 points in 2016 and 2020, voting for Trump by 30 points this time around, but also making up significant ground in places like Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx. Obviously, we know that New York City is still very blue, but it's getting less and less blue, and Long Island is getting redder and redder. Donald Trump flipped Nassau County. He won Suffolk County by 10 percentage points. He won it by like a hair in the 2020 election. So all around you see what's going on. Upstate New York is fed up as well with the leadership, and as a result, this is actually a prime pickup opportunity. And there's reason to believe that Donald Trump's approval rating is going to stay high because we're a very polarized country. Everybody's kind of made up their mind about Donald Trump at this stage in the game. He's not going to have an approval rating, it seems, in the mid to high 50s, but is he going to have one that's above water? Yeah, and if he can sustain that into the midterms, they're not going to go as well for Democrats as they did in 2018 when Donald Trump's approval rating was 45% on a good day. It's not exactly going to work out for them that way, especially because you have a lot of people that are engaged in politics that have never been engaged in politics before, and they're paying attention, and they support what Donald Trump is doing, and the Democrats are in total disarray. You're seeing what's going on with them. Every little thing Trump does that's very popular, like trying to deport criminal illegal aliens or illegal aliens in general, or when it comes down to things like Doge, trying to cut wasteful spending, identifying that we're sending money to like transgender opera plays in South America for some weird reason, and, exposing this stuff. They're having a meltdown, trying to act like this is a big problem, that Donald Trump wants to go out there and Elon Musk wants to go out there and audit the government and make sure that we can get ourselves out of debt. It's because a lot of government spending is money laundering, and they know it. You're seeing it at the national level. You're seeing it at the state level with corruption, and people want to change. 57% may not vote for a Republican, but they want somebody else. And Donald Trump is relatively popular in New York State, according to this poll, 46-51. Like, swing states didn't even have him at that approval. Even states he won didn't have him at that approval during his first term. So the entire vibe has shifted. The vibe has changed completely, and you're seeing it. And when it comes down to Trump's proposals, and you look at his policies, according to New York voters, when they just ask about the policy, a lot of them are extremely popular. Deporting immigrants illegally living in the U.S. who have been convicted of a crime, 79% support that. Only 11% oppose it. Mandating 2 genders, a culture war issue, +7. Deporting illegal immigrants without a criminal record, it's 50-50 in New York State. And you have 43% of independents in support of it. And, just 59% of Democrats oppose. A lot of people undecided on that topic, but still, that's New York State. It's popular. And the people that support it tend to care more strongly about it than the people who oppose it, which also helps. Also, taking back control of the Panama Canal. It's a little bit underwater, and it's not a main focal point of Trump's administration, but surprisingly, independents support it. There's more Democrats living in New York than Republicans, which explains why it's underwater, but still only 41% really oppose it. When it comes down to tariffs, that's a little bit underwater, but not ridiculously so, especially all the media hype that they've given it. It doesn't really seem as if, and honestly, we've seen tariffs, if you phrase the question differently, poll popular nationwide, believe it or not. And when it comes down to renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, that is not that popular, but it's just one of those Trump things. People aren't voting based on that. If you won't elect a Republican governor in New York who is not attached to Trump at the hip because Donald Trump wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, you were never voting Republican in the first place, to be completely honest. But the bottom line is that a lot of Trump's policies are wildly popular. If they asked about cutting, wasteful spending, I'm sure that would poll very well as well. And if Democrats want to die on these hills of open borders and a bloated bureaucracy, then be my guest. You're going to turn New York red, and Donald Trump is going to get more and more popular. You're going to see that flip. And that's the thing about the honeymoon period. It doesn't seem as if in the long run, because we've had mixed polling on, if Trump's popular or not. The first polls that were released were more right-leaning than the polls we're seeing now are a little bit more left-leaning. But what we do know is that Donald Trump is relatively popular, and it's not like a lot of people are going to change their minds about him here on out unless something vastly, different happens to our economy, which usually would mean that it's getting better. So that would help him overall. But regardless, I think that New York very well could elect a Republican governor. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it is true. Incumbents rarely lose, but when they're really unpopular, they almost always lose. That's the thing. Like Tate Reeves was one of the most unpopular governors in the country back in 2023, and he almost lost to a Democrat in Mississippi. And it is true, governors overall tend to be well-liked as incumbent. That's why they usually win re-election, but Hochul's not. She's less popular than she was during her first election, and she barely won. And that was a year that was not so good for Republicans overall. So we'll see what happens on the primary front. She might get a primary challenge, probably gets one from somebody. Doesn't mean that they're going to win the primary. I think that, honestly, she will win the primary. And then on the Republican side, I don't know what is going to happen there. Mike Lawler is kind of a rhino, but New York is also not a state that is a Republican state overall. It still voted Democrat by 12 points in 2024. So you're not going to have like the most MAGA candidate running in the first place for this. I don't know if Zeldin wants to run again. Obviously, probably not, because he's heading the EPA in Trump's administration, and he already ran before. So it could be Lawler. You would take him out of Congress, where he's kind of been a counter signaler, and possibly get an upgrade in the New York's gubernatorial place, because you're going to need somebody that can go out there and get enough voters, which I would have concerns with Lawler in like base turnout in an off-year election. But I will say that when it comes down to it, I think in a place like Westchester, yeah, he's going to do a little bit better in some of these places where he would need to do better for a Republican against Hochul to go out there and win. So we'll see what happens on that front if he's the nominee, whoever the nominee is. But when you look at it, Democrat poll showed that 44% would like a different candidate. Now, they don't specify generic Republican, but even so, if they polled Hochul against generic Republican, in both of these polls, I guarantee you that Hochul would be losing to said generic Republican as a Democrat in New York State. That is abysmal overall for anybody. And when it comes down to taking over a state like New York, a Republican governor would be a huge step in that right direction to say, okay, it's precedence. If the leadership is solid at the state level, the state party will get better over time. They'll be able to kind of, I guess you would say, improve the brand within the state. And if they're able to do that successfully, then when it comes down to future elections, could New York be in play? Maybe. I mean, it has moved to the right, especially because there's a lot of demographics that are in the New York area that have moved right, from Hispanics, especially Puerto Ricans, to Italian-American voters, a lot of working-class whites in Long Island, Staten Island, you name it. They've been moving to the right overall by a decent amount. Asian voters in Queens. There's a lot of voters with a lot more room to grow for Republicans in New York, and if they're able to go out there and do that in future elections, the state could flip in a good year for Republicans if you get some solid leadership in the state of New York. So we'll see what happens. We have a long way to go, but New York, could it be at risk of flipping Republican in 2026? Yeah, because Kathy Hochul is not popular and less popular in New York State as it stands today than Donald Trump, according to the poll from the New York Times. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.